Back here with Unit 5, Section 2, the cost of production. It's a really important section, and it's vital that you understand what I cover here today. So please, afterwards, if you have any questions, comments, please email me or message in the group discussion board on the class page. I can go over anything again. All right, so we're going to cover a couple objectives today. First, explain how firms decide how much labor to hire to produce a certain level of output. We'll analyze the production cost of a firm. We'll understand how a firm chooses to set output. Obviously, it's going to be to maximize profit. And then how a firm decides to shut down on a unprofitable business. So part 1, labor and output. Every firm business needs to answer this question. How many workers to hire? Firms have to consider how the number of workers they hire will affect their total production. So this is a table I'm going to reference quite a bit here. We can see in the first column you have labor, that's the number of workers. In this scenario, the textbook used make bean bags. So one worker, they can make 4 bean bags per hour. And then we'll get to the third column, which is called the marginal product of labor. So the marginal product of labor is the change in output from hiring one additional unit of labor. It's called the marginal product because it measures the change in output at the margin, where the last workers have been hired or fired. So for example, we see the first worker hired can make 4 beanbags per hour, so his marginal product of labor, or hers, is 4. Once we hire 2 workers, a second worker, output goes up from 4 to 10 beanbags. So the marginal product of labor then is 6 beanbags. And we can see if we add a third worker, we go up to 17. The marginal product goes up to 7. That's where we peak. So the marginal product is always going to be the difference from the output per hour from worker A to or worker point A to worker point B, whether we're going down or up. So generally, at first, we're going to have increase in marginal returns. So the level of production in which the marginal product of labor increases as the number of workers increase. And by adding more workers, each worker can focus on one part of the production process, will become skillful in that assigned task. Therefore, specialization increases output. So I go back to the table again. I said at 3 workers, we peak at 7 marginal product of labor. If we add a 4th worker, we go up to 23 beanbags per hour, but then the marginal product of labor goes back down to 6. So not a huge decrease. It might actually still be worth economically and profit motive reasons to actually have 4 workers, even though our marginal product labor is slightly down from the peak. We don't know yet. We don't have the economic data to do that, but it is possible. But eventually, though, as we saw with the peak, we are going to get to what's called diminishing marginal returns. That's where the level of production in which the marginal product of labor decreases as the number of workers increase. This occurs because eventually a firm will reach a point of hiring too many workers for its limited amount of capital. So we obviously have so much physical capital, whether it's machines or resources to make the beanbags. Eventually, too many workers for that amount. So then we get negative marginal returns. That's when we hire too many workers. At this stage, workers get in the way of each other because there's not enough equipment, etc. And our overall output decreases. So again, for the last time, let's revisit our table. We see, again, we peak at 3 workers. Once we add a 4th worker, we go back down. It still might even be profitable to have 5 workers. We're still producing 28 beanbags per hour, even though our marginal product labor is at 5. So we're probably going to, without having the economic data, the profits, etc., just look at the table, we could probably predict between 3 and 5 workers would be for this example, this firm's optimal amount. Once we get to 6 workers, then we see the marginal product labor drops pretty significantly. Our output's not nearly as good. 7, 8, and then eventually with 8 workers, we get to the negative. But we start hitting diminishing marginal returns at the 4th worker already. But again, economic reasons might still be worth it to have that. All right, part 2 is production cost. Paying workers and purchasing capital are all costs of producing goods. Economists provide a producer's cost into 2 categories, fixed and variable cost. Fixed costs are a cost that does not change, no matter how much of a good is produced. So example, rent. Now, rent can potentially change if you switch office buildings, but usually when you rent a building or an office apartment, you're fixed for that amount for a significant time. Sometimes it's a year, sometimes it's 2. So rent, machinery repairs, property taxes, salaries of your workers, that obviously can change year to year, raises, etc. But those would all be examples of fixed costs. They're not going to change month to month. Variable costs are costs that rise or fall depending on how much is produced. So an example would be cost of raw material. We have no idea what, maybe we need oil to run our machines. Well, there's a lot of outside factors that can change the price of oil from 1 week, or actually really 1 hour to the next. So cost of raw materials, some labor, sometimes hourly workers. If we need an hourly worker 20 hours 1 week, but only 15 the next, that's going to change the cost. Heating and electricity bills, again, winter months, heating's going to go up. Electricity, depending on how much we're running our machines. If we run them maybe we have a big order 1 month, we're running them 20 hours a day. Another month, back to normal, we're maybe only running 8 to 10 hours. So those are all examples of variable cost. Then we have total cost. That's, you add up the fixed cost plus all the variable cost. And then we have marginal cost. That's the cost to produce one more unit of a good. So let's look at our table here. So we're sticking with the beanbags in the same firm. The fixed cost is $36 a month for this year. The variable cost changes depending on the number of beanbags produced. So at 1 beanbag produced, the variable cost is 8. You see at 2 it's 12, 15, etc. So the fixed cost is going to go up slightly as we produce more beanbags. The next table is what's called marginal cost. Marginal product of labor, it's the difference from point A in beanbag production to point B. So if we're going from point A being 1 beanbags per hour, we're going from a fixed cost to 2 beanbags per hour to a new fixed cost of $48. So our marginal cost would be $4, 44 to 48. All right, part 3, set and output. As we've talked about a lot already, firms' basic goal, maximize profits. So to calculate profit, we need to know the total revenue and subtract it by the total cost. So we just want to know how to calculate total cost. So how do we calculate total revenue? Total revenue is the price of each good. So if we're going to say, for example, sell the beanbags, what was the example? We sell the beanbags at $24 per beanbag. Marginal revenue is pretty much always, and for our examples, in real world, it's not always equal to price, but for our purposes, marginal revenue will always be equal to the price of the beanbags. So we sell them at $24 per beanbag. So calculate total revenue is the marginal revenue, or the price of each good, times number of goods sold. So if we sell 1 beanbag, it's $24 for our total revenue. If we sell 2, it's $48. And let's go back here to our table one last time. So again, you see the total revenue as we just covered. The last thing is profit. I want to talk about. So how do we calculate profit? Well, profit is the total revenue subtracted by the total cost. So if we look at the 2 beanbags per hour, we sell them at our price of, which is equal to the marginal revenue, $24. Our total revenue is $48. Our total cost of producing the 2 beanbags, though, is also $48, so our profit is 0, break even. Then we look at 3, we start seeing a profit of $21. 4 beanbags per hour, we make a profit of $40. So you get the idea. We obviously have to produce more to make higher profit. And to the point, much like we did for labor, we'll get to a point where the variable cost might actually be too much. We don't know what that is yet, but you get the idea. So the last thing is, when do you make a shutdown decision? Well, when the factory begins losing money, the owner must consider its operating costs and revenue when deciding what to do next. So if we weren't making, say, we get it to 10 beanbags per hour and our profits are pretty minuscule still, maybe under $200, well, you could keep going, but you're not making very much. So that's all decisions that have to be made by the owner. All right, so that's a wrap for today. Again, if you have any questions, please drop by an email or in the class message board. You guys have a great